Good morning, everyone. So, as you probably know, we do have a Modern Pro Tour on the horizon this weekend. And if the Pro Tour were tomorrow and I were qualified, I would not be playing this deck probably. But it does have a ton of scary-looking cards, although my initial testing has not been good. I did want to see like how far I could push this weirdo archetype, and my good friend and former roommate John Pennick sent me a list that was very similar to this, and I made a few changes, but the overall spirit of the deck is there. So what this deck is trying to do, which might be kind of confusing because I certainly had no idea what it was doing when he sent me the list, is that this is a Dredge-based Jeskai Ascendancy combo deck. So I'll give you a second to take that all in, because that's kind of a big deal there. So you know, like the other Jeskai Ascendancy decks used to be like blue, white, red, and like you play an Ascendancy, unearth a Fate Stitcher, play a bunch of cantrips, and you'd be able to go off because of things like Treasure Cruise or Dig Through Time. And this deck has no such luxury, especially because sure, you have some cantrips, right, but not a lot, and you definitely don't have the density to keep going off and make that your plan. So what my boy John did was assemble this combo with Life from the Loam and Flame Jab. So with 2 Fate Stitchers and an Ascendancy, that is effectively infinite. At some point, you know, you're going to run out of cards in your deck to dredge, so it's not actual infinite, right? But it does deal them 20 damage, basically, no matter how you look at it. So in the meantime, we're playing things like Faithless Looting, Is It Charm. I got a Miser's Tormenting Voice, which was some technology from another friend of mine, Bobby Graves. And you use those to put a Dredger in the yard, either a Troll, a Stinkweed Imp, or a Life from the Loam. So you start dredging a little bit. Maybe you hit a Faithless Looting, maybe you dredge some more, and then eventually you'll hit Sun Titan, Unburial Rites, and an Ascendancy with some Fate Stitchers. So from my initial testing, this is like a turn 5 thing, and I think you can do it a little bit sooner. There might be a way to make the deck actually a little bit faster. John had Magus of the Bazaar in his deck to make the deck a little bit faster, but I don't really like Magus when it's your only creature, and you're not really forcing them to use their removal on anything else. Like, maybe if they have an Abrupt Decay or something, you know, then it's actually good for you if they kill your thing, because then they're not decaying your Ascendancy. But other than that, this deck is super, super weird and takes forever to combo off. So I don't know. Like, we'll see how this daily event goes. I'm not sure how many rounds I expect to win here, but I think it all depends on matchups. But regardless, this deck looks sweet. So maybe someone who is playing in the Pro Tour can pick this up and, you know, change it in the next couple of days and make it actually a contender for the Pro Tour, but I am not very hopeful of that fact. So deck is wonky, but has a lot of scary cards, so I wanted to play with it. So other than that, meta base is kind of weird too. We have some Is It Boilerworks, which are pretty good with the Fate Stitchers, and might be able to accelerate you a little bit. Other than that, we are basically the full 5 colors. We have some Gemstone Mines. I would play more Gemstone Mines, except the problem I ran into is that when you're going off, you actually need a hard green source in play, because you're going to Fate Stitcher it multiple times. So Gemstone Mine doesn't work when you're comboing, but other than that, it's probably the best land that you could have. As for the sideboard, a lot of things you could do here. I definitely considered having something like a bunch of Hooting Mandrills and Tassigurs and Tarmogoyfs and just trying to like give them the beatdowns and stuff, but it's so weird because you might be able to side in like 15 creatures, and yeah, they won't have removal spells for all those creatures, but you still end up with this deck that has a bunch of really terrible cards in it. So there are very few decks I would expect a Tarmogoyf to just go the distance. Same thing with, you know, Hooting Mandrills and whatever else, but that is certainly an option. You could look for some weirdo transitional sideboard, but I wanted to try a bunch of things that interact with my opponent and see how resilient this combo actually was. And if it turns out that it's not resilient, maybe you could build some sort of hybrid deck where you do end up having those delve creatures and maybe you build your main deck with that in consideration, and then you just go from there. And like maybe post board you have a somewhat cohesive deck. Another thing I considered was Seismic Assault, because we're already playing Life from the Loam, but the issue there is that Seismic Assault is very difficult to cast. Metamorphose is a card that's been in and out of the main deck, and if I had Metamorphose main deck, then Seismic Assault in the board would seem pretty cool, actually, especially since you could like Sun Titan it back if it ever gets to that. But for the most part, we just have some Gnaw to the Bones for the burns and any sort of fast deck. Defense Grid for blue-based counterspells, because you really don't have that many threats. There's Ascendancies and Unburial Rights, and like maybe if you get to the point where you're hardcasting Sun Titans or whatever, but there aren't many things that they actually have to kill. So Defense Grid seems kind of necessary, or not kill, counter. So Grid seems kind of necessary. Scavenging Ooze is probably the scariest card, which is why I have 4 Decays and 2 Lightning Axes. Things like Thalia aren't that big of a deal because you have the 3 Flame Jabs main deck, and I'm kind of hinging on this to be able to buy you enough time in certain matchups where, like, okay, they play a Noble Hierarch, and it's like, well, I'll just Flame Jab that, and like hopefully that buys me an extra turn, you know? But there are things like Scavenging Ooze where it's kind of tough to actually Flame Jab them, especially if they wait until turn 3, and they'll almost certainly have time until turn 3. So you do have, like, Flame Jab is a charm to, like, kill some stuff. So, you know, hopefully that's enough time. But Scavenging Ooze is definitely a big issue, as are things like Grafdigger's Cage and Nile Spellbomb, Relic of Progenitus, etc. So I wanted to board in a bunch of stuff against those things, so I have 4 Decays, 2 Ancient Grudges. So that's about it. I have no idea if this deck will actually work in a competitive environment, so I'm pretty excited to see, but I'm not anticipating too many match wins.